Triggers. By Joe Sugarman. Introduction. The real underlying physiological triggers that motivate, inspire and influence a prospect to make a buying decision are often unknown to even the most experienced salesperson. Knowledge of these triggers can be a powerful weapon in the battle for your prospect's business. Many of the triggers are very subtle, many are exactly the opposite of what you would expect, and still others you are probably using yourself right now, but don't even realize it. Not many books cover this area. And for good reason. Nobody else that I am aware of has discovered the unique relationships between selling from a printed page and selling in person. But there are some powerful concepts that are easy to learn and understand and yet quite effective when implemented. I uncovered many of these triggers as a result of my ability to sell a product or service through the power of my words. In short, I was a copywriter who wrote mail-order ads for more than 30 years. I also owned the company JSNA for which I wrote, so I experienced the direct consequences of all of my actions. During the time I learned what ad approaches worked, which ones didn't, and the underlying reasons in both instances. And I was always amazed. Sometimes using a trigger and changing just a few words at the end of a 1,000-word ad doubled the response. Imagine doubling your sales effectiveness with just this one concept. And I developed 30 different triggers. Once I realized how valuable the information I had uncovered was, and how much it could benefit anybody in sales and marketing, I decided to share this knowledge with sales professionals. To once had a very successful salesman come to me and say, "Joe, I am a very good salesman. If you gave me a product in the name of a good prospect, there is no question in my mind that I can sell him. But what you do absolutely amazes me. Through the power of your words you have been able to sell millions of people by duplicating your sales ability on a mass scale. Could sales be doubled simply by the way you express yourself in a single closing sentence? Can you increase the value of your product so it appears to be a bargain, the same product that might have been perceived as too expensive?" The answer to these questions and many more is a resounding yes. And I proved these theories in the many seminars I conducted during the 70s and 80s and then later in books I wrote. I see physiological triggers as a powerful concept that could help a tremendous number of people. Why? Because we use selling every day of our lives, whether we realize it or not. When we're young, we have to convince our parents to feed us our favorite foods, take us to our favorite playgrounds, and buy us fun toys. As we get older, we have to use selling techniques to get a good job, sell a product or service, and relate our desires to other people. Simply being aware of these triggers not only helped me when I was writing copy, but also gave me a weapon that I could then apply to live television selling. Indeed, I first spent 6 years selling products through infomercials. Since then I've spent the last 7 years on the TV shopping channel QVC selling millions of dollars worth of products sometimes in a single day using many of the sales techniques I learned in my years as a copywriter. In Triggers I take you through each physiological trigger, explaining its power from my copywriting experience. Then I relate how to use the technique in personal selling situations. I'll give you plenty of examples and stories to give you a multifaceted perspective on what works, why it works and when to use it. At the end of each chapter is the name of the trigger I have just explained. At the end of the book is a complete list of triggers in Appendix A, and in Appendix D there is a complete summary of triggers and action steps you can take to implement them. If, by the time you finish this book, I've illuminated just one major concept or sales technique or tool that can improve your sales results and even your life in general, then this book will have been very helpful. But you will leave with much more, as you will soon find out. Throughout the book I refer to direct marketing as the method I use to sell my products. Direct marketing is a general term that applies to any form of marketing where the prospect orders directly from the product source and does not touch the product until it is delivered. Usually the prospect pays for the product before receiving it. Retail is the opposite of direct marketing, as the prospect usually sees the product before paying for it. The location in which the product is presented is usually some intermediate step in the marketing process, such as a store or showroom. I use terms such as selling in person, personal selling and even one-on-one selling to denote the typical sales-prospect relationship in the form of a sales presentation that we are all familiar with. It is estimated that 95% of the reasons a prospect buys involve a subconscious decision. The purpose of this book is to show you what goes on during the sales process that triggers a sale and how the subconscious mind responds to various aspects of an offer. This knowledge will become invaluable to you, as you will soon discover. 3CH1- The ice cream ordering sequence. People are funny. And the way they respond sometimes makes for some very valuable insights. That's the basis of this true but crazy story of how I ordered ice cream and discovered a very valuable physiological trigger, even though I didn't realize what I was learning at the time. In the late 1950s I was working in New York selling printing equipment. One day after dinner, I decided to stop by a small ice cream parlor to have a dish of ice cream. I sat down at the counter and the waitress asked me for my order. I requested my favorite dessert. "I'll have a dish of chocolate ice cream with whipped cream." The waitress looked at me with a puzzled expression. "You mean a chocolate sundae?" "No, I want a dish of chocolate ice cream with whipped cream," was my response. "Well, that's a chocolate sundae without the syrup," replied the waitress. "Isn't it just chocolate ice cream with whipped cream?" "What's the difference?" I inquired. "Well, a sundae is 35 cents and plain ice cream is 25 cents. "What you want is a sundae without the syrup," replied the waitress, with a rather smug expression on her face. "Okay, I want chocolate ice cream with whipped cream, so if you have to charge me 10 cents more, go ahead," was my reply. This took place in the 50s, when $1 was worth a lot more than it is today. The ice cream arrived and I ate it. It was delicious. Chocolate ice cream was my favorite dessert in college, where I had just completed 2 years, before taking off a year to work in New York. I had always heard that New Yorkers had a different way of expressing themselves, so I guess I wasn't surprised at my first experience. A few days later I went out to dinner at a small diner on the Lower West Side. When the waitress asked me if I wanted dessert, I responded, "I'll have a dish of chocolate ice cream with whipped cream." The waitress looked at me and put her hands on her hips. "You mean a sundae?" Here I go again, I thought. "No, not a sundae but a dish of chocolate ice cream with whipped cream." The waitress responded, "Well, that's a sundae without the chocolate syrup." After a few exchanges back and forth, I finally agreed to get the chocolate ice cream with whipped cream and pay an extra 10 cents, just like I had to at the ice cream parlor. For the next few weeks, each time I ordered my favorite dessert, regardless of the restaurant, I'd still go through the same hassle. One evening, after having worked really hard during the day, I was finishing my meal in a restaurant in Midtown Manhattan, when the waitress looked at me and asked, "Would you like dessert?" I really wanted my favorite, but I just didn't feel like going through the entire verbal routine that I had been experiencing for the last few weeks. "I'll have a dish of chocolate ice cream," was my response. I didn't ask for the whipped cream. This was a simple request, one I didn't expect a hassle over. As the waitress was walking away, I thought to myself, in what must have been a fraction of a second, how much I really wanted chocolate ice cream with whipped cream, and that I should not let myself be intimidated by a waitress. "Hey, miss," I called, as the waitress was still walking away, "could you put whipped cream on that ice cream?" "Sure," was her response. "No problem." When the check came, I noticed that I had been charged just 25 cents for the ice cream and whipped cream, something that I had been charged 35 cents before. I also remembered that the whipped cream had been an afterthought, something I ordered as the waitress was walking away. Would this work again? Was this the way I would have to order in the future? The next time I ordered ice cream was the following day. But this time I went to one of the restaurants where I had ordered ice cream and where the waitress had given me a hard time. I had a nice meal, and then when I ordered dessert, I simply said to the waitress, "Chocolate ice cream." She wrote it down on her check pad, and as she walked away, I injected, "Would you also add some whipped cream?" With a slight glance back to me, she nodded her head and walked away. A dish of chocolate ice cream brimming with whipped cream was brought to my table. I asked for the check. Sure enough, the amount on the check was only 25 cents. The ordering technique worked again. I tried it again and again, purposely going to restaurants where I had previously been charged 35 cents only to be charged 25 cents simply because of the way I was ordering. I even reverted to my old way of ordering as a kind of reality check, and sure enough, I got trapped in my old pattern of having to explain that I didn't want a sundae and ended up paying 10 cents extra anyway. But the ultimate test was yet to come. While I was having lunch with a friend one day, I told him of the new way I had been ordering ice cream and how the way that I ordered it determined the price of the dish I got. He found it hard to believe and then said, "Why don't we do a test? I'll order chocolate ice cream with whipped cream, and after I go through the sundae routine, you order just chocolate ice cream. As the waitress is walking away, you call out to her and have her add some whipped cream to your ice cream. And then we'll see what we both get and how much she charges each of us." And that is what we did. Sure enough, the waitress gave my friend the same argument I had been getting. And my friend finally agreed to accept the sundae without the chocolate syrup. I ordered just the ice cream, but as the waitress was walking away, I shouted, "Would you put a little whipped cream on my ice cream as well?" The waitress nodded and continued walking away. When the ice cream arrived, both dishes looked identical. But not the check. Sure enough, my friend was charged 35 cents for a sundae and I was charged 25 cents for a dish of ice cream, even though both desserts looked identical. What in human nature would allow the same product ordered in a different way determine the price? The answer is the first physiological trigger called consistency. The waitress committed to accept my original order of just the ice cream, but allowed the addition of the whipped cream, because she had already accepted and committed to my initial request. How can this be viewed and made useful in the selling process? As a direct marketer, I have determined that the most important thing you can do to turn a prospect into a customer is to make it incredibly easy for that prospect to commit to a purchase, regardless of how small that purchase may be. It is therefore imperative that the commitment be simple, small, and in line with the prospect's needs. Once the commitment is made and a prospect becomes a customer, the playing field suddenly changes. There now exists a level of commitment and consistency directed in your favor to encourage future purchases. A good example of this can be seen at car dealerships. The salesperson tallies your entire order, gets approval from the general manager, and then has you sign the purchase contract. As she is walking away to get the car prepped and ready for you to drive it away, she turns to you and says, "And you do want that undercoating, don't you?" You instinctively nod your head. The charge is added to your invoice. "And you also want our floor mats to keep your car clean as well, won't you?" Once a commitment is made, the tendency is to act consistently with that commitment. The customer nods his head. A good example of this phenomenon was told to me by John Spoelstra, the former general manager of the Portland Trail Blazers basketball team and president of the New Jersey Nets. I would personally visit a prospect, sell him a simple yet basic ticket package, start to leave and then turn around, just as I was about to walk out the door, and offer something else. Very often my customer would simply nod his head, and say under his breath, "Yeah, sure, add that to it too." One of the important points to remember is to always make that first sale simple. Once the prospect makes the commitment to purchase from you, you can then easily offer more to increase your sales. This is very true for products sold from a mail-order ad or from a TV infomercial. I have learned to keep the initial offer extremely simple. Then, once the prospect calls and orders the product I am offering, and while the prospect is on the phone, I offer other items and end up with a larger total sale. An additional sale occurs over 50% of the time, depending on my added offer. Once you've committed to the original purchase, you are committed to a course of action consistent with what you have already undertaken. In the case of buying, you are now primed to buy more by virtue of the original commitment to buy. In the case of ordering ice cream in New York, you can even save a few bucks.